Hello, everybody. Evelyn Serrano here with ST Forward. We are welcoming you to our Meet the Candidate event. This is an opportunity to get to know Caroline Menjivar and her platform. And a quick disclaimer before we get started. The purpose of this meeting or this event is to connect our Sunland-Tujunga residents, our neighbors, with local candidates, and also to promote civic engagement in our community. We also wanted to share the event is not an endorsement of Ms. Menjivar or any other candidate. Her platform or her campaign in preparation for this event, ST Forward reached out to all candidates for California State Senate. And so far, Ms. Menjivar's campaign is the only one who replied to our invitation. I'm so glad that Ms. Menjivar is here. Before we get started, we wanted to share with you our land acknowledgement, which reads this way. We acknowledge the unceded territory of the Tongva, the Tatavian, the Chumash, the Key, and the Yuhaviatam, the original stewards of this precious land. We honor the ancestors who took care of the land and lived in harmony with all our relatives, animals, water, sun, plants, mountains, all creation. As guests of this land, we share the responsibility to care for and support the well-being of these relatives. May we honor traditional indigenous knowledge and practice. May we advance the healing of our environment and society. May we create urgent space for indigenous culture bearers to lead the way towards healing and interconnected change. May we see with our hearts that this is our work to do. A little bit about our organization. We are ST Forward, and we're very passionate about community, collaboration, equity, and inclusion. We founded the organization just a few months ago, maybe about a year ago. And we decided to do so because there was a need to create spaces for action, anti-racism, civic engagement, land stewardship, and input from diverse voices in our community. We invite you to check us out at www.stforward.org. This event is hosted by ST Forward's Civic Engagement Work Group. If you're interested in learning more about this group, please just reach out to us through our website, stforward.org. And now I have the pleasure of introducing you to Ms. Caroline Menjivar. I'm gonna share a short bio by the candidate. Caroline Menjivar was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, a product of local public schools from Encino Elementary to CSUN. Caroline has led a life of service and dedication to the Valley. Shortly after high school, Caroline enlisted in the Marine Corps and served from 2009 to 2016. After serving on active duty, Caroline returned to work as an EMT in Venice. She continued her education at UCLA, completing a Master of Social Welfare, where she served as a therapist for domestic violence victims and earned the David Bonnet Fellowship that provided an opportunity to work in the Los Angeles Mayor's Gender Equity Office. Caroline previously worked as a field deputy with Councilwoman Nuri Martinez's office, and then as East Valley representative for Mayor Eric Garcetti. She volunteers her time serving on the GLSEN Los Angeles Chapter Board and the Help Group's Kaleidoscope Advisory Board. Both organizations work to create more inclusive environments for LGBTQ+ youth. Additionally, she serves as a director of DEI for the San Fernando Valley Young Democrats and the public relations officer for the San Fernando Valley Marine Corps League. She currently works at MEND, a nonprofit in Pacoima, as Director of New Program Initiatives. And without further ado, let me welcome Ms. Menjivar. Thank you so much for being here with us. We're excited to be in conversation with you. And we have some questions that were submitted by our neighbors and some that our organization had for you as well. And so I'm gonna pass it to our dear friend KT, who can get us started with the questions.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you so much.
KT, I think you need to unmute real quick. Oh, there
T,
we go. Okay.
can you hear me now? Great.
Yes.
Community questions that were submitted to us, and the community questions may be coming in all along as we go along, and I will be turning it back over to Evelyn at that point to monitor the live questions. But those questions submitted in advance, how do you plan to advocate for opportunities for our youth?
Thank you so much, Katie and Evelyn. I apologize, I've had an allergy cough, so I've had a frog in my throat this whole day. Well, you know, like Evelyn mentioned, my background is very much involved in creating opportunities. You know, she mentioned that I serve on boards, and those boards are where I actually go and I train K through 12 schools here in this very district. I train teachers and administrators on how to be more safe and affirming for our queer kids. I put on professional development trainings for these schools because I want to make sure that should a queer kid go to them for a question, that they're better prepared to respond to any type of situation, that they make sure that they are outreaching for different opportunities for these youth. I have actually taken youth from this district on a field trip to UCLA, my alma mater, to show them that public education, higher public education is accessible and just an arm's reach away. There at UCLA, I took kids to show them what the Pride Center looks like, to also show them that schools exist that accept you for who you are. And I made sure I did this field trip because I'm looking to represent a district that there's a gap and disconnect between high school graduates and then going on to a 4-year college. I've held career panels for middle school and high school kids here in this very district, where I've brought professionals from all types of backgrounds. I brought a musician, an entrepreneur, a professor from LA Valley College, a firefighter, to show them like this is opportunities that you can get involved with, just so we can have conversations now early on, so they can be better prepared once they graduate. I've had a passion for empowering youth my whole life. I think about the mentors in my life when I was growing up who had a helping hand in where I am now. Because I am the daughter of Salvadorian immigrants. English is my second language. I was a latchkey kid. My mom had to work all the time. I didn't have a parent that could help me fill out grant applications for college, to understand what FAFSA was like. You know, I was the one as the firstborn who had to fill out bills for my mom, who had to translate. So I always want to make sure I give back and be the mentor. So what, as a state legislator, I'm thinking about, these are the things I'm thinking about. Bringing courses to our high schools that are gonna lead people to jobs, like vocational training. You know, Silmar just did a groundbreaking for Silmar Studios that's gonna bring livable wages, great paying jobs to work in the entertainment industry. I wanna make sure we have partnership with our local schools for electricians, for grips, for apprenticeships, to be a gateway into these jobs. I also want to make sure that we're changing how we fund our schools. We understand, and this is, you know, this is a broken record here, what schools get more money versus others, because we still fund our schools based on attendance versus enrollment. We understand certain areas we need to look at them in a holistic manner, because there's so many things at play here. The city of LA, while I don't have jurisdiction over their budget, just announced their budget. And if you look at the budget set aside for youth, it's minuscule. It's really small. And we need to be more preventative in how we approach things. If we ensure we provide these opportunities for youth, then we can stop the pipeline to poverty, to substance abuse, to homelessness. And then that's why I want to make sure that we're looking at the core issues and bringing access to our youth and programming access.
Thank you. Another question from the community. What can you change for the betterment of the lives of those in this community?
No, yeah, I mean, The reason why I'm running is because of the many barriers that I had to endure growing up, right? I think about my commute. I used to live in the West Valley. I grew up in Reseda. Winnetka was my apartment for 8 years in Winnetka. But I always worked in the East Valley. I was a domestic violence therapist here in the East Valley. I worked as an EMT here in the East Valley. When I worked in local government is here. And now as in a nonprofits here in the East Valley. So I would do this trek and I would cross the 405 freeway and immediately things would change. The streets were a little dirtier. You saw more graffiti. There was more blight, more vacant properties. And I always question, why is that so? The San Fernando Valley is one whole, the San Fernando Valley. Yet this 405 served as an equity divider, just slap in the face to constantly remind you of as what zip codes of depending on what zip code you lived in is what you got as in terms of services. I want to make sure that I want to go to Sacramento to make sure that's not the case. I want to make sure that when we're looking at land development, we're looking at zoning, we're looking at what businesses are coming into our communities, that it's not stereotypical things, that when we're looking at environmental injustices, we need to recognize what happened in the past and work to undo all of these wrongs. For example, I'm looking to represent a district that has the poorest air quality, the highest rates of children who go to ERs for asthma cases here in this area. Sunland-Tujunga, is, a little different where y'all have one of the cleanest airs of the state of this district, closest to our Angeles our national Angeles forest, and I want to make sure that everyone has the same air that Sunland-Tujunga has across the state district. So the things that I'm looking to do is to even that playing field, is to make sure, like I mentioned earlier, funding is changed at education level. It's to make sure when we talk about infrastructure spending and bringing it down, that we're talking about access to public transportation, where this district has a good proportion of people who depend on public transportation. When we talk about like the light rail that's coming to this district of Van Nuys Boulevard, we talk about packages that come with how to ensure that our small businesses don't fall under while we displace a couple of individuals, a couple of patrons for visiting their businesses. We need to talk about access, the Metro fare. While I won't be directly on there, I will have a big voice for the Metro board and ensuring that we get to that free fare. I'm thinking about things about universal childcare, universal healthcare. These are the barriers in place right now that restrict individuals from reaching a full parity compared to other individuals. I want to make sure I go to Sacramento and I fight for those things. And finally, I want to make sure that I'm fighting for affordable housing here, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a roof over your head, nothing else is really going to fall into place, because you're going to be more consumed about trying to find the next place that you can lay your head on.
I'm going to deviate from the questions just a little bit to ask more about what you just said. You had talked about the poor quality of the air east of the San Diego freeway, the 405. What do you think you'd be able to do in the state Senate that would help to improve the air quality in the East Valley?
So let's talk about the San Fernando Valley as a whole, and I'd like to talk about a situation that just recently happened. Senator Henry Stern was championing a bill to put a timeline in place to shut down Aliso Canyon, while not in my district, while not in the East Valley, still affecting the Northern Valley area. Unfortunately, we just found out, I think yesterday or the day before, that the bill was amended so many times that it didn't even look like the bill that the senator initiated before, where he was asking for it to be shut down in the next decade. They pushed it all the way to 2045. They also wanted to, instead of shutting it down, changing it over to hydrogen. Again, if, for example, we were to lose Senator Henry Stern and he became the next supervisor, we wouldn't have a senator representative in the entire San Fernando Valley to champion for environmental justices. And if he doesn't win, he needs somebody to help him push these kind of bills. We need to offset the bench right now up in Sacramento and ensure we elect individuals who are champions of environmental justice. I am the only candidate in this race that is actually endorsed by an environmental justice group, the California Enviro Voters, formerly known as California League of Conservation Voters. Because of my experience or my background with this, because I worked with organizations with like Pacoma Beautiful to rally behind closures, because I've actually canvassed to bring Prop 68 money to Sun Valley, and now there's a construction of a park being made right now because I ensured that people got involved and made their voices heard that we needed more open spaces in our park poor areas. Those are the things that as a senator you can fight for. You as a senator, I will be ensuring that we step away from our dependency of fossil fuels. And that starts at the state level.
Back to the questions from our Sunland-Tujunga residents. Can you support legislation that would end the Los Angeles housing emergency order?
Can I get a little, is there any clarification on that? Is it are you talking about the current emergency order right now in terms of pandemic?
Yes.
Well, we wouldn't be able to on the state level, if that's the question.
I believe that was the question.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any jurisdiction over that. No jurisdiction. I can definitely, be a liaison. Let's say, for example, we're getting a lot of calls at my office by constituents. Some individuals, there's a lot of levels in government that some people call a specific office thinking that they have the jurisdiction over there. Instead of passing the buck, we'd be be willing to have those conversations with my counterparts on the city level and say, hey, we're hearing a lot about this. Just want to let you know. But I will note that right now the emergency order is going until June 2nd, unless it gets extended. It's about 11 more days of it.
And now I'd like to go to questions from our organization, ST Forward. What would be your approach in creating more access to mental health and supportive services for all, including our unhoused neighbors?
I love that question. My number one platform is mental health. I'm a social worker. That is my niche. I call myself perhaps a people wonk. I am all about ensuring that we increase our social services, because I feel like for so long we've been very reactive to emergencies and looking to put a band-aid over something that has a root cause that we need to address. So there's a couple of things I want to do on the state level. I want to make sure redefine what means to be gravely disabled. We're seeing certain individuals. This is not to say that every single individual on our streets right now falls into this category, but we do have a percentage of people who need dire, serious mental health services. We have people who are jumping in front of vehicles who are unaware of the danger they're putting themselves. We have individuals on the streets that are nude, are suffering from psychiatric illnesses. We have people on our streets who are literally rolling around in their feces and dying. We're letting people die on the street. If we get someone off the street who needs mental health, currently we don't have funding dedicated for beds related to mental illness. Right now, our jails and prisons are our #1 mental health provider because that's where the beds are, right? That's where we're putting people. We're arresting people and just putting them into jail, where in reality, they need wraparound mental health services. So what I want to do is ensure we increase our in and outpatient beds for our providers who deal with people dealing with substance abuse. Here in the Valley, Tarzana Treatment Center is a pillar of an organization around that. But when they find beds, it's in Inglewood, it's in downtown LA, it's in Palmdale, and people want to stay in the communities that they know. And I don't blame them. This is my home. I would feel very lost if I was placed somewhere else. So we want to make sure that we meet the patient where they're at and provide them a bed in their backyard. So I want to see more of those. I want to ensure that we have mental health teams, just like we have teams that LASA has on the streets, but I want mental health teams on the street, our public transit locations. I want to make sure that people on our streets aren't waiting until they get a home or placed in permanent supported housing or a tiny home to then get some help. I want them to get help on the street. Additionally, a lot of our facilities for unhoused, like a permanent supported or a tiny home, don't have necessary mental health professionals there. I just took a tour of a new congregate living in Northridge that was recently Skateland, where I would go as a kid. It is now a 107 bed for single men and women, and they're going to have 2 licensed therapists on site on top of their case managers. Most often than not, we just see case managers at these locations. But Hope of the Valley went the extra mile and ensured that they had their own therapists there to meet the needs of these individuals. And that's the kind of things that we need to see more of across our entities. Lastly, I want to make sure here in the San Fernando Valley, the city of LA just unveiled its first mental health team. And it's one team for the entire San Fernando Valley that's responding to 911 calls. I don't know about you, but even if you call 911 right now, it takes a long time. Imagine if you only have one team to respond to your 911 calls for mental health for the entire valley. It's going to take a long, long time to get there. I don't want pilot programs anymore. I want stationed mental health teams that are going to respond to every single 911 call near their jurisdiction. And that's the funding that I'm going to be bringing on the state level. And this is a prime time to do it because Governor Newsom is really championing to ensure that we increase access to this. And I'll end on this note. We need to also talk about our workforce development. We can't just say I'm going to hire 500 social workers if they're not there, if they don't exist because they're currently burnt out right now because of the pandemic and because they currently have like 300 cases to one individual. I will work on workforce development through stipends at schools, through housing vouchers if we need social workers or therapists in certain areas to make sure we make it easier for them to help us.
We just had the state program buy a brand new apartment building, 4-story apartment building, and provide the funds for the social services and the mental health services for the, I believe it's approximately 80 beds that will be available there. So I know what you mean about it does have to have the funding attached to it, and it is a good time for that to be happening. What specific plans, this goes to a completely different area, the next question, what specific plans have you for renewable energy?
Right, so, we have right now, about a year ago or two, Governor Newsom talked about our path towards electric vehicles. And that's really the only path we have. We don't talk about our gas ovens. We don't talk about our air conditionings. And I want to tackle that on as well when it comes to an overall environmental manner, right? The Times a couple weeks ago said, this is going to be the hottest summer we've had yet, but also the coldest summer we'll ever have. That's scary because each year we keep being told this is the hottest yet, but it'll also be the last time it'll be this cold. And we're acting like we can stop at every single light during this emergency that we're in. So I want to talk about two things here. The supply and demand portion. Earlier talked about our dependency on fossil fuel. We are working on the supply portion where we're restricting how much corporations can utilize. We're restricting gas here and there, but let's talk about the demand portion. If we bottleneck the demand part of it, we can make fossil industry obsolete. A couple of things I have in mind. When we talk about retrofitting, when anything breaks in an apartment building, we're still replacing it with the exact same model. There are programs that we can initiate to ensure that when any building is retrofitted, we, for example, replace it with heat pumps, which use up 20% of the energy compared to an AC. I'm looking to go up to Sacramento and create these subsidy programs for people to have access to this, to get credit when they not convert, replace, or exchange, that's what I'm looking for, exchange their gas oven for an electric oven. I want to make sure that we're closing down every single, let me back up. I understand that we have to phase it out. For example, we understood with the Aliso Canyon, the valley generating plant in Sun Valley, we need to phase it out. There are individuals, there are employees that we can retrain and convert them to green jobs, who have more than enough years on the job to do the training. We also recognize there are some employees who there's not enough time to retrain them. They probably only have 5 years left until they retire. They can stay behind and close out these plans because we'll need people to close out. So I'm looking at, again, the workforce development of this portion and ensuring that people don't lose their jobs, because green jobs, we can create millions. There are millions and millions of jobs of this once we transition out. I want to also make sure we pass bills that are currently being gutted in the Senate in terms of buffer zones, to create buffer zones around 3,000 drilling away from sensitive areas, at minimum, like schools, like residential areas that we haven't been able to pass. Another thing in our pathway to renewable energy is that we need to hold corporations accountable. They're currently not being held accountable because they're not allowing us to capture the data that shows how much GHG, gas house emissions, are being put out into the air. And then finally, I will say is that at the end of the day, we need to elect individuals who aren't going to be beholden to these industries. You know, people always say this: follow the money. Where is the money? Who is holding the puppet lines for these for a lot of our elected officials? And you're seeing gas. I'm very upset again recently, like I mentioned earlier, about this Aliso Canyon bill. We need to make sure we get our champions for the Valley, because the Northeast in particular has had it rough for a long time. And finally, I will say, in terms of the Whiteman Airport, you know, I am a proponent of looking to see what we can do to reimagine that space, because it's caused a lot of unsafe accidents, to say the least, and the people of this area deserve better.
Thank you. How has your varied work history prepared you for the office of state senator?
Well, you know, I am proud to say I'm the only candidate that has experience that is going to allow her to start on day one. At minimum, I'm the only candidate that's actually worked in local government. I've partnered with every single level of government's office throughout my tenure at the mayor's office, at Nuri Martinez's office. My time in the Marine Corps, again, working with bureaucracy, you know, working with the same type of hierarchy. Well, that word is escaping me. It's all in government. And I'll start with that experience first, because that was 7.5 years of my life. And it really molded who I am today. In the Marine Corps, I was a platoon sergeant. I led over 50 Marines who came from all types of corners of our country: Florida, Texas, Louisiana. And we were all obviously raised very different, with different mindsets and had different opinions. But at the end of the day, I was able to bring all these different kinds of people to the table, looked at a mission and said, this is what needs to be accomplished. And I would organize them and I would lead them. I used that experience in everything that I've done since then. When I was the East Valley area representative, I was in charge. I I was the liaison for areas that had multi-million-dollar homes. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I was the liaison for communities that had families that were really struggling to pay all their bills. Again, working with different types of individuals. And whenever I had a push, a campaign, it's not that I changed the message, but I pulled things that resonated with various people, because that's what a leader does, has the ability to work with all types of individuals, to a certain degree of respect, obviously, but that is able to pull those things that would resonate and understand, and be able to adapt to those various backgrounds. And I really, attribute that to my experience in the military, working as an EMT in this very district, visiting every single hospital. I got exposed to all types of cultures, working with all types of individuals, working in skilled or picking up people in skilled nursing facilities. It brings this unique perspective that no one else has. I can go to Sacramento and talk about how we need to bring more accountability for our skilled nursing facilities, who oftentimes mistreat and are negligent for our senior community, who are the #1 population falling into homelessness. I can talk about the unhoused individuals on psychiatric holds, because I actually picked them up and I would take them to psych-ERs. I actually visited homeless encampments, and I talked to people, and I know that the #1 population increasing is women, and it's because they come from instances of trauma. And I can talk about pushing policy on that area. I am going to Sacramento with this very unique experience of already working with the community, of already organizing in this community, of being on the front lines that no other candidate has. And I really think it speaks to this like power of ceding power in a community, to see someone who has been with them battling to be able to now go on to represent us. So, I think it's a beautiful background that I bring. I think it's great to be able to represent a community that you speak the language of as a bilingual individual. You're able to speak to a majority of your constituents, and that you share the same story and background of the community you're looking to represent.
What issue do you believe is the most pressing facing the communities of Senate District 20, and why?
I don't want to bring it down as little as this, but I say quality of life. At the end of the day, people want to be able to come home after a long working day and feel safe in their communities, have clean streets, have paved sidewalks, not have to fall and break their ankle on an uneven sidewalk like I did a couple of months ago, have a tree in front of their home that provides shade, make sure that if they're waiting for a bus stop, that there's a bus shelter there. These are the things that are quality of life, that they're breathing breathable air, that they're getting they're at a job that it has a livable wage, and they have workers' rights. I think all of that falls under quality of life. So while it's two small words, I think it's just an umbrella for everyday Los Angelinos and Burbankians from Burbank, who really just want to make sure that they see their hard-earned tax dollars at work, and they have a safe area that they're growing up in. Katie, this question has so many umbrellas under it. I think under quality of life is obviously affordable housing. That's a huge thing, affecting a lot of people right now, that you are able to lay your head on something that is your apartment, your home, but something that you feel very proud of obtaining. And I feel right now that we're not seeing that, especially people in my generation, millennials who are forced to still live with their parents until very, very late on, because it's too expensive to purchase something. I think that's something that's really impacting a lot of people of the state, of this district, especially in the area that has a median house value. Purchasing a home, the median price is close to $1 million. Like, you need like 6 roommates for that. So that's what I would say.
And I think probably most of us agree with you. Still in the midst of unprecedented drought, we are facing water rationing while trying to prepare for even more harrowing fire seasons. What leadership would you provide in the state Senate to help us overcome these challenges?
Yeah, so there are a couple of projects in State District 20 that if they were actually being continued to work on and finish would bring such relief in terms of that. I'll bring up one example. It's the Roy M. Shaw project in Sun Valley. If you're ever driving 5 southbound on 5 through Sun Valley and you look to the right, you'll see about 4 piles, 25 to 30 feet pile high of dust, debris, and it's coming from a construction site that is supposed to be building this water capturing park, right? Water that we can utilize for these instances. But projects like this have been on hold or in construction for half of my life already. Honestly, since the beginning of 2000s, they've started construction on these kinds of projects. That's necessary ability for us to capture our water and utilize it. Has anyone ever driven down to Hunga Boulevard? That's an area that gets flooded. I've seen mattresses flow down that street, and we have various streets like that across State Senate District 20. And we're passing off opportunities of being able to reuse this water to combat fire season that is very prevalent in this area. So at minimum, I'm thinking about championing those projects to ensure that they continue and we're able to reuse that water. I also think about, I had a recent presentation on this, is that there hasn't been recent audits of our water system. We have about 7,000 in the state of California, and there's not a lot that's been in terms of maintenance on them, audits to ensure that they're adequately providing clean water for our residents. And obviously, we know the communities are always disproportionately impacted by a lot of injustices, and access to clean water is one of those that happen in our BIPOC communities. So I want to make sure that I'm championing things like that to ensure our equipment is up to standard and we are having audits of these levels of clean water. So those are the 2 things, not limited to, but those are the things that right now I'm thinking of.
Thank you. We're going to depart for just a moment because we've received another question from a resident. What tools would you use to help defend democracy and democratic norms?
So I say this, State Senate District 20 could potentially get a fighter for them. As a Marine Corps veteran, what are we known for? I mean, at the end of the day, I am a lover, but I will fight for this district and represent it against special interests. That's the kind of elected official that someone is going to get here. I've been fighting against injustices my whole life. My first protest was at 19 years old when I rallied against California's Prop 8, and I protested in Hollywood to ensure I had my fair share of my rights. I've been doing sit-ins and kiss-ins against homophobia for a long time. I recently, for women's rights, I rallied in Van Nuys and shot at the top of my lungs. I've rallied in Los Angeles, and I'm the only candidate when it comes to reproductive rights, the only candidate that has been endorsed by a pro-choice organization. And I'm very, very proud of that. Not just because I'm a woman, it's because it's human rights. I am that fighter that stands against injustice and doesn't ever fall, I guess, victim to the bystander effect where I say, oh, someone else is going to take care of it. I utilize the loud voice that God gave me because I know not everyone wants to use their voice, and I'm okay with lending my voice until they find their voice, and we are even louder up in Sacramento. So when it comes to defending, I think about things that we can enshrine in California. When it comes to Roe v. Wade, I'm very excited that we have the potential in November as voters to vote to codify reproductive rights in our state's constitution. I'm excited that I saw some senators put in protections for trans kids who can come from Texas and Florida to come find a safe haven here in California. I want to make sure that we're providing access to people who come to California as a safe haven, because it's getting to the point that we're going to have to accept refugees from our own country and coming from other states. So, when I think about democracy, I am a queer woman of color my rights have been on the chopping block since I was born. I know what it's like to have to lose some of my rights or have to fight for some of my rights. Those lived experiences push me even further to ensure I protect democracy as a whole, ensure people have the right to vote, removing barriers from individuals from voting, exercising their God-given right to rally and protest, and protect all of our human rights.
You have said that you believe that your zip code, age, race, gender, or sexual identity shouldn't determine your destiny. What legislation would you propose as state senator that you believe might begin to shatter this brutal reality?
I think I think everything I've said really talks about that, right? All the things I'm looking to champion is so I can offset this bench of inequity. When I talk about ensuring that we have adequate number of mental therapists in our schools, is because I want to catch things before they get too big. I want to make sure that we're addressing every student holistically so that when they graduate high school, they have the necessary tools to be successful. We understand certain zip codes have added barriers. I think about the stories my mom would say, and it doesn't really apply here, but the principal does, right? That she had to walk miles and miles to get to school. And, they didn't make it easy for women to go to school, but so if she really wanted to, she had to do miles and cross a river. I think about that here in the zip code, right? I think about there's a lot of parents that have to go to work really early, and if a kid is going to go to school, no parent is going to be there to make sure they get up early, they go to a bus, they walk their mile or mile and a half to get to school. These are added barriers that perhaps an individual might think, why am I doing this? They probably have to walk through streets that are unsafe, probably see graffiti on each wall, probably see an unhoused individual on the street, syringes on the street, so many barriers just to get an education. Then they get an education and then they see how expensive it is. Their parent doesn't have a bank that can turn to and pay for this. So there's added barriers. And if there's internships, most of them are unpaid, but what if you need to work to ensure you pay your own bills? You won't be able to get that prestigious internship that could open the door for a job. So all those things at play, I think about ensuring that we have internships that are getting paid. I'm interested in having conversations around paying our social work interns, paying our marriage and family therapist interns, our school counselor interns, paying them a stipend to help them pay their living expenses. That's going to draw more people into these jobs. I think about providing housing stipends for our teachers, for our healthcare workers, to put them in locations where they're needed. These are jobs that us as a society put so much burden on to ensure that our world goes round, but we're not making it easier for them to stay in these jobs or be attracted to these jobs. So everything I've talked about is really to address that we need to remove these inequity barriers that are in place for so many people because of zip code. Yeah.
Some people overwhelmed by the realities of feeding and housing their families and employment insecurity may not see climate change as an urgent issue. What do you have to say to them?
I love that question. You're right. You're absolutely right. When I was in the mayor's office, I was his Green New Deal liaison. And what that meant is that I had to work. I took the Green New Deal, the book, which is really, really thick, and people aren't reading that, honestly, unless you really grew in this. And I took it and I created action guides within an advisory group. We created these action guides that went into the community that an individual could read, that was accessible, that made sense, and they could accomplish a task that was towards a greener living, how to create a community garden, how to compost, how to store your food correctly in the refrigerator to make it last longer, how to access, what rebates exist to trade your car, and how to create landscape that is drought resistant. But I always said this, some of these aren't going to resonate with everyone because we're pushing solar so much, yet some people are struggling to find a job. We tell people not to waste their food, yet some people don't have enough food. So the things that I talk about also when it comes to environmental justice is, hey, don't you ever wonder why you don't have a bus shelter at your bus stop? Hey, don't you ever wonder why our streets here aren't cemented, but they're paved with dirt? That's an environmental justice issue that resonates with people. Hey, do you ever wonder why your gas is so expensive here? That's an environmental justice issue that resonates with people. The fact that you have no open space, that you have no parks around here. Why is it that you're driving an extra 2-3 miles to go to a different park outside of your zip code? Well, because it's nicer, or because it has these amenities. Don't you ever wonder why there's no access to our Angeles Forest is literally in our backyard? That's an environmental justice issue. Or the fact that our kids go to school and it's asphalt everywhere and they have to sit on their backpacks because it's extremely hot. Those are things that resonate with people that are like, oh, I didn't know that's environmental justice. So I pull things that would resonate to them and say, yes, solar is great. Electric vehicle, let's talk about that. Fossil fuel, yes. But no, I also want to make sure we talk about the things that directly impact the day-to-day activities of an individual.
I'm going to deviate one more time, but I'm going to go across the aisle. Most of the candidates for this office are Democrats, and I'm going to ask a question that I was asked this morning while preparing for this event that comes from across the aisle, a Republican question. We hear Democrats talk a great deal about those who are less fortunate. But for the hardworking, middle class, white male-led family that feels like it's still very, very hard for them, what do you have to say to them that can show them that you will represent them as well?
Thank you so much for asking that question. And I'll be honest, no one has asked me that question, but I love it. I spoke earlier about the East Valley that I represented for the mayor's office. And I talked about my more affluent areas that I represented, Valley Village, Toluca Lake, Valley Glen. These are areas that when they had a concern, their concern was different than other areas like Panorama City, Pacoima. Concerns here were like food issues, bill, eviction. Over here is like, hey, this house next door is having house parties and it's noisy. I put in the same energy for both cases because that is their world. And for them, that is their emergency. On the other side, that is their world. And for them, that is their emergency. That is their day-to-day thing. There is absolutely no comparing it because again, it's what they know, right? So I never not paid attention to any constituent concern thinking that's not important. I'm going to put my energy in here. And that's what I bring to the table. And again, I know I bring this up a lot, but I really turn to my veteran status of this honor, courage, and commitment are the three things that Marines mottos go by. It's the honor thing that I always think about. I'm representing an entire people, not just the left, the right, the middle. It's the entire people. And I'm able to hold my own in conversations with the left and with the right. I come from a working class family who my father was a busboy and worked up to his American dream and now owns a small business. I actually am the only Democrat in my entire family. My entire family is Republican. They think about Ronald Reagan and the amnesty that was given to them. You know, I was raised on very different values. So I'm able to have those conversations because I have those conversations with my family. At the end of the day, I am working class. I am a homeowner. I'm not a renter, but I was only able to get that because of the VA loan. Another thing, while I benefited from something, I recognize that not everyone has this access, and I want that access. When I talk about the unhoused on the street, I'm doing that because A, I want to clean the streets, and B, it's the humane thing to do. So I can speak to both individuals who look at it and just say, oh, it's so filthy, I pay so much in taxes, or someone who says, oh my goodness, like, why are we treating these individuals like that? At the end of the day, I'm approaching it with a very middle mindset, and that attracts both sides. So that's what I would say. I am a very realistic individual. I do a lot of research in anything that I do. I'm a very principled individual, and that I'm able to go to Sacramento and have these conversations to find common ground with a lot of people. I will say one thing: while homophobia has been around in the Republican Party a long time, I do miss the Republican Party of the McCain era, where I could have conversations with Republicans and put some stuff aside, but say at the end of the day, this is what needs to be done for our community. So I hear you. This isn't a category that I'm not taking into consideration, because affordable housing is still something that impacts categories who are, I think, Katie, you mentioned white male-led families. That's still something of concern for you. Having a livable wage is something of a concern for this category. I'm pretty sure these families don't want their kids to be living with them until they're 40. They want to make sure that they're also able to afford housing. At the end of the day, these things, impact everybody across demographics.
And lastly, why are you the best candidate for State Senate District 20?
We just spent an hour, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Hearing about my background, no one else in this race can talk about this background. No one else in this race can talk about the personal and professional connections to the communities within this district, who can say, I want to do this, but also I've done this already. I've done this to show I have a proven track record, which is why the LA Times endorsed me, saying, elect Menjivar for her proven track record and hustle, because that's what I do. I hustled always to make sure that I brought the resources necessary to communities, that I was that ear that people wanted, that people needed to vent about issues in their community, because I ensured that I responded to constituents in a timely manner, because I know how hard and difficult it is to get the ear of our government offices. That I always ensured to find different creative ways for things that arose in the community, not just sticking to I'm a staffer and I just need to do this, or I'm a therapist and I just need to do this. I went above and beyond. And I've been going above and beyond without having a special title for all my life. And with having a title that brings a lot of different resources, we can imagine we can do so much in this district. So that's what stands me out from other candidates, is that you get someone that's going to be a go-getter from day one.
Thank you so very much. And let me hand you all back to Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Ms. Menjivar. It's been a pleasure hearing your answers to all of these questions and understanding, giving us insight into your platform, your values, the background that's resourcing you in this journey. We appreciate your time, and can't wait to share this conversation with the rest of our community here in Sunland-Tujunga. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Sunland-Tujunga.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline.